Don't just act on whatever you feel, but your feelings are important, but they're not driving the train.
Right.
What drives the train is what's right and good and true, and feelings are maybe a few cars back from the
Yeah,
the front of the
exactly.
train.
Welcome to Mind and Heart, and I have with me my guest, Dr. Karen Villa, and we're going to continue unpacking the balance strategies, and now we're going to look at ages 6 to 9 years old.
Mm-hmm. So again, if you can deliver your children and with good regulation to these years, they're going to learn better, they're going to get along better socially, and they're going to be able to engage in that complex thinking that comes from the playground. So that was one of Stanley Greenspan's books was Playground Politics.
That's true.
And his idea was that once children are out on the playground, they are developing all kinds of complex thinking skills about navigating the world. And if they can arrive in this balanced state, they're going to be better able to do that.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, there's so much that they learn. Mm-hmm. I mean, recess time, it's you think they're just out there not doing anything, but there's so much that takes place.
Oh, my goodness.
In that time, the interaction, and I think that's, it's wonderful. I mean, I used to reinforce this with the teachers, just, let's, be present to them. Let's watch them.
Yeah.
Because you can see so many, how it's kind of like that passive time, who kind of goes off alone.
Right.
Who's, in the mix
engaged,
with everybody else.
Who's out of control.
Exactly.
So you mentioned connect and redirect, where you, rather than discipline a child, you just kind of distract them or redirect them. And that is one of the tools. And I think that would straddle the later 0 to 5 range and the early 6 to 9 range, that rather than use discipline, you try and the connect part is tune into the emotional world of that child and maybe make some comment about what they're doing and what they're feeling, and then kind of distract them and redirect them to an adaptive behavior. So that's an important tool to have both at home and at school.
Right.
And then I put limit screen time, because what we call executive function, and we've talked about that in previous podcasts, and that's the ability to have self-control, the ability to pay attention, the ability to engage in goal-directed behavior. All of that is forming really at a rapid pace during these early years. And screen time can interfere with that development. So especially when I see kids who have an attention deficit disorder, my recommendation is no screen time from Monday morning until Friday night, so that these attention and concentration skills can come online and a child's learning can consolidate, because too much screen time will interfere with that. There's a direct correlation in the research between the amount of screen time and the amount of attention and concentration problems.
Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
What I love about what you're able to bring in is that this is from a science,
right.
And parents will do everything for the physical, the brain development of their child. And sometimes we can say it, and it's like, it's like almost like a moral authority on it, like, you're doing something wrong, but not really doing something wrong. We're just trying to help. Again, we look at the education of the whole child.
Right, and fostering and nurturing that child to become who God intended them to be. That's where all this is ultimately leading to, these kinds of strategies and tools.
Right. Well, let's keep going here.
Well, we found in our home that when we had screens on in the morning, it was a very chaotic time.
Interesting.
And so, we kind of quickly learned that we had to they were distractions for us, they were distractions for our kids, and then it was always chaotic and stressful leaving. And you don't want your child to have a lot of stress before they arrive to their school day. So anything that you can do to minimize that stress before leaving to school is just going to make them more open to their learning. So that's planfulness, the night before. Right. It's not embedding distractions into the morning. It's
orderliness, just having that pattern. That's right.
And then not becoming overly stressed ourselves, where we're flooding them with emotion just to get them going. So I would recommend that parents limit the amount of stress that children have.
And it's interesting that you say that, because, like, for us in our life, like, like we have the silence, so we kind of have this calm way in which our day begins. And I'd notice the times like if it was going to be a snow day and I'd be on the computer like before I went into prayers to look, and then when I get to prayers, I'd have a little bit more of this agitated feeling, and I can imagine if you're trying to get out the door, you got the TV going, and there's this chaos, Or now if I go, you go home, and you're not used to having all the TVs on, so it's like overload.
Stimulating, right. And if you think for a child who doesn't have fully developed emotional and cognitive capacities, how agitating it can be to separate and leave from their parent when there's a state of stress. So that's one of the recommendations that I've listed here. Certainly recommend continuing very intentionally with the Healthy Mind Platter. It's so easy to let children play video games endlessly or be on the Wii or be in too many sports and constantly on the run that we really do have to get intentional about embedding that Healthy Mind Platter into the day. And I think also over the summer, because with the structure of the school year, you can have this kind of more of this balanced, enriching activities throughout the day. But in the summer, so many kids I find are regressing to these just very repetitive, not nutritious kinds of activities. So it's good to have a Healthy Mind Platter, say in the morning in the summer, and then maybe let your children have that downtime in the afternoon to balance it that way. So you want to continue to help to regulate emotion when it shows up with your kids in these elementary school years. They're still going to have it. They're not going to be fully balanced and regulated. And so you want to help them understand that emotions are temporary states, for one thing. Another one is what we call the signal function of affect. So what that means is that our emotions are meant to give us information. They're not meant to just assault us and pass by. There's something about that emotion that needs to be understood and known. And when you teach your kids that we need to gather information from this emotion, that can be helpful in establishing what we call that signal function.
And oftentimes we talk about that even when you're studying, theology or whatever, you talk about the emotions, that they're really neutral. And as you said, they're a flag or something of something else that's going on interiorly or something in your mind. It could be any of, passions, anger, fear, joy, sorrow, sadness, but just to put words to that.
Exactly, and labels like that and understanding around it. I meet a lot of children these days who have somehow been taught that their feelings are facts. So if I feel like hitting somebody, then I'm going to do it. If I want something, I should have it. And it's been interesting to kind of dial that back and say, no, there are pieces of information that are like other pieces of information. I can't just take something from another child if I want it. I have to take that piece of information.
I know, and it's so important to be able to make those distinctions because I remember, this is related, but to kind of put it in the spiritual realm too, that I remember one time talking to this priest about going to confession, and I was like, I'm really just angry, And so he looked at me and he said, well, do you want to push that person down the stairs? I was like, well, of course not. Right. And he said, well, then that's just a feeling,
That's not a fact.
He's like, if you've done anything to act on that, I was like, well, but it's like, oh, that was kind of a good distinction.
That's an important distinction.
That there could be things, and it may have been a justifiable reason, but just to be like, now, if I had done something, he's like, then that's,
Right. And delay is such an important part of balance, and that we don't, do what our impulses might direct us to. And there is a huge difference between, reflecting on a feeling you're having and acting on it. Yeah. And the Virtue Program is trying to teach a lot of those skills, that you don't just act on whatever you feel, but your feelings are important, but they're not driving the train.
Right.
What drives the train is what's right and good and true. And feelings are maybe a few cars back from the
yeah,
the
yeah,
front
exactly,
of the train.
yeah, and two, like I mentioned about meekness, we're going to count to 10, or we're going to walk away.
Delay,
just to learn. I think that's the important thing. And two, when you do study the virtues, it's just giving you these skills really that also help you to develop a healthy mind and healthy heart.
That's right. So I think it's really important in this information age that's so complex. We see a lot more anxiety than we ever have. And from early on, you can, as a parent, start teaching your child about how their mind works, and that there's this mind-body connection that they can learn to relax. So to specifically teach relaxation, which is things like, deep breathing, taking time for quiet, and learning to be still, are all ways to get in touch with a relaxation response when so much of the world is building in this anxiety response. So,
and I think too, that I want to reinforce that to our listeners, because what you did say is that you are seeing this anxiety coming lower and lower, and we were also seeing that same thing in education, with students, and it's just so sad because these are just things that sufferings that they really shouldn't be, and if we can just give them the tools to help regulate that.
And I think limiting that screen time is a huge part of that, because their brains aren't developed enough to take in that much stimulation and that much information, and then they don't have the cognitive resources left over for their learning, so they keep getting further and further behind, and it's just like a snowball effect, I think.